Anna, you wanted to look at a video first of all, and we'll expand on that video. But you wanted to look at a video from Paul Murphy in the Dáil. It's the end of a longer speech, and it's focused on the Ukraine, or what I would call the NATO-Ukraine-Russia conflict that's occurring at the moment. We'll have a look at the video, Anna, and then we will have a chat about it.
But it's also true that what is happening at the moment is a proxy war between US-led Western imperialism on the one hand and Russia on the other. And in that conflict, neither side have the interests of ordinary people. Russia is looking to expand its area of influence after a period of retreat at the expense of the right to self-determination of ordinary people in Ukraine. But the US imperialism in the West are looking to hem in Russia and are looking to prepare for a future conflict with China. And it is ordinary people who are suffering. And so instead of going along with the drive to war with militarisation, Ireland, ordinary people here, should be raising their voice in opposition and in calling for peace. And we have to ring the warning bell that sending more and more heavy weaponry, and it only goes one direction, it's massive tanks now, it may be F-16s in a couple of months' time, is a big danger to the entire world. It does not bring peace any closer. Instead, it brings the danger of even nuclear conflict, which threatens all of humanity. Thank you.
Anna, you wanted to lead with this one?
Yes, and I'm just mindful of the fact that several months ago, Sabina Higgins, who is the wife of President Higgins, spoke about the need for peace, and it absolutely caused a massive furore at the time. And the mainstream media went against her, and the powers that be in the government went against her when she called for a peaceful resolution and a peaceful settlement to the conflict. And I think it's a game changer, really, when somebody like Deputy Paul Murphy stands up and makes the statement like he has just made. I think that if he was to make that statement last March, it would have been met with a huge it would have been met in the same way as Sabina Higgins's plea for peace was met. Now, the other thing is this, that you and I have had many, many conversations privately in the last year, and I know that you have a forensic knowledge of everything that has been going on in Ukraine and the Donbass region going over many, many years. And what was happening in Donbass, you actually covered in your interviews with people like Vanessa Beeley long before the war broke out. But, you and I would have a different view on the issue. And my view has been, as a history teacher, I see parallels between what was happening in Europe in the run-up to World War II, where there was appeasement of Hitler. Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, flew out to Munich and met with Hitler and agreed to give him the Sudetenland part of Czechoslovakia, and flew back to London and said, "It is peace for our time." But of course, once Hitler got an inch, he took a mile, and there was the takeover of all of Czechoslovakia, the takeover of Poland, and then the outbreak of World War II. And I see, what has been happening with Putin. I know that I was thinking of it actually 2002, 2003, there were men from Lithuania who had been conscripted into the Russian army when they were behind the Iron Curtain. And now they were over here working seasonally on the bogs here in Longford. And I remember them telling me at that time that people in Lithuania and Latvia were very, very fearful of the rise of Putin, because they really felt that he was an imperialist. And that was my first what shall I say, encounter with Putin or knowledge of Putin was what these men had to tell me. And I suppose I didn't look at him very closely over the years. And then when this conflict broke out, or this war broke out last year, I remembered back to what those men had said, and I saw him as somebody, that is, as Paul Murphy has said, they're trying to, I suppose, expand Russia and regain some of the territory that they lost, when the Iron Curtain fell. Now, that is not to say that Zelensky, and he is by profession an actor, and I do believe that he's a quisling, and he is controlled, and he does what he's told, and I do believe that any place where the Americans get involved, that it does not work out well for the people living in the various countries like Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, the list goes on. Any place where the Americans move in, they leave in their wake a trail of destruction. And I think, and I fear that that's what's going to happen in Ukraine. Ukraine, after all, is the breadbasket of Europe, and huge resources. And what we're seeing now is that all of these natural resources and so on are all moving from state ownership into private ownership. The monies that are being given to Ukraine are actually loans. So basically what we're seeing is perhaps the carve up of Ukraine, the same way as we had the carve up of the countries of Africa, in the 19th century. It's modern imperialism. So that's the two sides of the argument.
I don't
Putin
think it is
not
fully. I don't think it is. I'll make the other side. You make your side.
Well, that's more or less. And again, viewers, I am no match for Finbar when it comes to discussing this issue. He is so forensic in his knowledge, and he has studied it for so many years, and we disagree. But I suppose what myself and Finbar exemplify is two individuals who have different opinions on an issue, and we listen to each other, and we agree to disagree. I've learned an awful lot from my conversations over the last year with Finbar. I've learned a huge amount, but and I would like to think that Finbar
just come in for a little second, Anna, there, just so the viewers don't forget what you had said. Just to respond to that, first of all, in terms of comparing it to what occurred in the 1930s and into the 1940s in Europe, I fully agree with you. There were Nazis who were determined to overrun Russia. And those Nazis in Germany were financed by the likes of the Bank of England, by American businessmen, and they were facilitated by big US and UK companies, as well as German companies, to try to achieve that, as well as achieve other goals. And they viewed the Russian people as lower than the Aryan people. And we have a situation now where the United States and the UK in particular have once more funded a 20-year project to carve up Russia. And one man got in the way, and that man was Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin stopped the oligarchs, the Western oligarchs, from carving out and emptying out massive Russian companies, Russian industries, because the industries had to go from public to private when the Soviet Union fell. And the people of Russia were left with nothing. And Putin stopped it. That's the reality of it. And to my mind, Putin is as much of a humanist as any world leader that we have at the moment, because of what he stopped the Russian people from going through. And so that's why the Russian people time and again choose Putin. And we're told it's a dictatorship and it's totalitarian. But when I speak to Russians, that's not what I'm getting from them. Free Russians who are free to speak and talk about these things. And they're very proud of Vladimir Putin. And they're very proud of what they often describe as Mother Russia. And we have what is now the culmination of a 20-year project that involved financing actual, real, live Nazis and arming them. and having a coup. Now, Paul Murphy spoke about expansionism. There's no evidence whatsoever of expansionism. There's quite the opposite. When you speak to people who were involved in the negotiations of the Minsk 1 and 2 agreement, when you speak to people like, or listen to Jacques Baud, whose primary role via NATO was to find the proof that Russia was arming the people in Donetsk and the people in Lugansk and funding them. And over his years, he publicly says he could not find one bit of evidence because it wasn't true. In fact, quite the opposite. Russia, to try to maintain stability, was purposely doing the opposite, ensuring that there was nothing going over those borders to ensure stability. And it came to the point last December, 2 Decembers ago, then last January and last February, that it looked like this idea of moving the Slavs, creating that free space. And this is the Nazi language being used by the regime that was in place ultimately through a fake coup, a coup by the United States and people like Victoria Nuland. And we're in a situation now where we have a war that, yes, does reflect the Second World War, but not exactly in the way that you say it and in the way of who would reflect who is Hitler and who is not Hitler. I believe that the bad guys, as you know, are in Kiev and are supported by the UK military and intelligence, and are not supported, they were created by the US and the UK military intelligence and things like that. So that's where I stand on those key issues. I don't believe Russia is expansionist. And in terms of self-determination, and Paul Murphy has a cheek here, and either he's pulling wool over our eyes, or on the other hand, he's ignorant. But the people of Donetsk and Luhansk and Crimea expressed their self-determination in democratic votes that had international monitors. And they expressed that they wanted, initially, they wanted to be autonomous, a federal state within a federal Ukraine, just like there are federal states in Germany. That's what the Minsk agreement was. But we know now that Angela Merkel and Sarkozy and the rest of them have all publicly admitted now that Minsk was a game they were playing. They had no intentions of maintaining Minsk, and they didn't give a damn about it. They just wanted to build up the military to try to destabilize and eventually destroy Russia, create a civil war in Russia, and create a real threat of a nuclear war. There's where I stand on Paul Murphy's statements. I'm not berating anybody, but that's the reality of the situation. And I'm very concerned that the narrative has been so intense. I think the whole COVID thing created this freedom by the press and governments to censor, to do whatever they have to do to shut down people who challenge the narrative. And that's why you don't really hear this kind of language or these kind of explanations out in the mainstream media. But it is good that we can talk about this, Anna. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to move on to something that is attached to this, and it's who is not allowed to talk in the way that I have just spoken. In Germany, there was a peace activist who used the kind of language that I have just used in relation to Ukraine, Russia, and NATO, and he is now been sentenced to 40 days and nights in prison and a large fine. Here's the story here. Peace activist convicted of criticizing German war policy in Ukraine. In January, the district court in Berlin, Tiergarten, convicted the peace activist Heinrich Bücher because he spoke publicly against Germany's war policy in Ukraine. The verdict is a massive attack on the basic democratic rights of freedom of expression and assembly. It commemorates the persecution of anti-militarists in the Weimar Republic, who, like Karl von Ossietzky, opposed the rearmament of the Reichswehr. Bücher is a member of the Association of People Persecuted by the Nazi Regime, Association of Anti-Fascists, and the Left Party. He runs the Co-op Anti-War Cafe in Berlin, which regularly hosts anti-militarist events. On June the 22nd, 22, he gave a speech at the Soviet Memorial in Treptower Park on the 81st anniversary of Nazi Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, in which he condemned German politics cooperation with former Nazi collaborators in Ukraine and showed understanding for the expressed views of the Russian president. The judge at the district court, Tobias Pollmann, therefore sentenced Bücher to a fine of €2,000 or 40 days in prison. According to Section 140 of the Criminal Code, his criminal offence consisted of publicly approving a crime of aggression. Section 13 of the Code of Crimes Against International Law, in a way that is likely to disturb public peace. The verdict was issued in the penal order procedure, which does not provide for an oral hearing, with the accused being heard and witness being heard. So this was done with him not there. The defendant has 2 weeks after the penal order is issued to appeal, which Booker reportedly did. If he does not do this, the penalty order is considered a final judgment, and appeals against it are then no longer possible. So that's from the German version of the Workers' Solidarity newspaper. We'll just go back there for a wee second. Anna, what's your thoughts on that story?
Well, as you said there yourself, that if you were to say in Germany what you have just said, you'd actually end up in the same situation that he has found himself in. So, you know, we have so many freedoms in this country that we take completely for granted. And, you know, there is the old saying, you don't miss the water until the well runs dry. So we must be very, very, very careful in the months and years ahead that we don't end up in a situation like we have in the UK, where they're trying to ban the trade unions, in Germany, where there's an attempt made to jail somebody because of their view goes against the prevailing narrative. You know, we're very, very, very lucky in this country, but we shouldn't take that luck for granted. And I suppose that's really all that I have to say on that issue.
I suppose in Germany being seen as the lead country in Europe, it is a bit worrying that those laws have been introduced, that people are not free to express themselves, even if they are saying something like they don't agree with the explanation given by their government of a war in wherever. You should have a right to be able to say that, you know, and it would appear in Germany that right is being suppressed.